It's 11:26 p.m. and you're on 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, coming to you from what used to be the third floor of a brick box on Atlantic Avenue in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and what now feels like a small island held up by old cinder blocks and a prayer. The air has that heavy salt taste that sticks to your teeth. It's warm for late autumn, about 78 by the cheap dial thermometer I stole from the break room, and the wind keeps pressing at the boarded window like a tired shoulder. There's no hum from the city anymore, no cars below, no slot machine chimes, no sirens, no gulls even. Just the faint slap of water down on Pacific and the hiss of it sliding past the drowned bus stop where people used to wait for the jitney. I'm running this on a rig that wasn't meant to last a week. One old diesel generator with the throttle set low to save fuel. A string of golf cart batteries scrounged from a warehouse by the inlet, and a thrift store inverter that whines like a mosquito in my ear. If the generator coughs even once, I can feel it in my bones. If it dies, we go quiet. I don't want quiet. Quiet is when the water thinks you forgot about it. If someone you loved was still out there, and this was the only signal they'd ever hear, what would you say to them? I can't tell you if what's happening is only here or everywhere, but the lines that used to bind us together, cell towers, fiber, those low satellites that promised bars on the beach, those lines are snapped or gone dark most of the time. I get bursts of a weather robot now and then, something from farther inland that talks in that flat voice about rivers at flood stage, storm warnings with names that feel wrong this late in the year, and a coastal advisory that never ends. Word traveled on paper before it traveled on any wire. You could read the story written in salt on storefront glass, and in the ragged paint lines on plywood, where people tried to go higher, one board above the last high water, then another, until the nails had nothing left to bite. I wish I had better news to open with, but if you've tuned in this late, then you already know not to flinch. This is a long night. We'll take it one breath at a time, one street at a time, and if the tide grants us mercy, we'll take a second hour. I didn't see the first sign, not the true first one. The true first sign was a thin wedge of ocean creeping across bulkheads during what should have been an ordinary high tide back in June, the kind the locals shrug at, king tide, take your shoes off, laugh and say, I remember when the curb stayed dry. I brushed that off like everyone else. I saw the second sign. It was a week of mornings where every radio song had a faint warble, like the whole band was playing underwater. I thought it was our antenna, or the wet air, or my head. Then the beach vanished twice in 1 month, gone all the way to the dunes, not during a storm, but under a clear sky with a pale moon still hanging there like a fingernail. Men with tattoos who never asked for help were carrying their kids through water that reached their belts in the crosswalk. A bartender in Ventnor told me he found minnows in the ice chest after the lunch shift. There were crabs walking down the middle of Atlantic like they owned the place. You want the moment, though, the one that broke the story in my head and replaced it with the truth. It happened 3 Fridays ago, 4:17 in the afternoon. The light tense and yellow, the kind you get before a bad thunderstorm. The ocean didn't storm the boardwalk, it just stood up. That's the only way I can describe it. The sea level didn't rise like a bath filling, it rose like a living thing, a slow lift across the whole horizon, a rounded lip advancing at the speed of a man jogging, and people stared because it was quiet, too quiet. And the sun was still on the water, and it looked fake until it curled itself over the railings and stepped down into the streets. We had cars packed on Ohio and Kentucky, and all the little lanes that smell like fried dough in summer, and their alarms went off one by one as the water touched them, and then they died all at once, like someone cut a wire. I heard the power transformers out by the marina pop like muffled fireworks, and there was a flash in the same second 12 blocks away, which doesn't happen unless the whole web is getting rewritten in real time. The ground vibrated, not shaking like an earthquake, more like the deep push of a freight train that you can't see, a pressure you feel in the meat of your ribs. My friend Alice, who used to work the hotel security cameras, came running with a tablet in her arms and no shoes, shouting that the casino basements were taking water on the land side, not the ocean side, like it was coming up through the drains and the cracks. She had a cousin with the gas company who had called 10 minutes before and told her to shut off every valve she could find, and she did it with a wrench and swore as she turned them because her hands were shaking, and she said, "If the water finds a pilot light, the whole block goes." We both thought we'd see a line of firefighters, red trucks, lights strobing off puddles, and that we'd hear the bullhorns telling people to move to higher floors. There was no line of trucks. The drawbridges locked open. Someone in a box far away pressed a button and said, "If you lower those bridges, you trap the inland towns." So the bridges stayed up, and the people on the islands were left to figure out ladders and rope, and the old footpath on the railroad berm that folks hadn't used in 40 years. You're going to want a reason. I keep wanting the reason to be something neat, like a single storm, a single broken wall, a single bad call in a control room. I got a photocopy from a guy who worked at the NOAA tide gauge in Cape May that said the monthly mean was jumping like a heart with an arrhythmia. I got a printed map from a grad kid who used to sleep in the studio when we carried late-night jazz, and his map had colors that ran together like a bruise, and he said the Gulf Stream doesn't hold where it used to, and the shelf edge out there has slumped in places we don't watch. A retired Army Corps engineer came by with a notebook of numbers and told me to look at the perigee calendar and the new habit of these long fetch winds that never seem to quit, and he said something about sills and resonance, and the bays stacking water they can't spit back out through the inlets. Then he got quiet and said the honest part, which is that all of these small pushes came on top of a baseline that crept up year after year while we argued about how much and how fast. And then one afternoon, it crossed a lip we didn't see on any chart. We live on saucers, he said. When you fill a saucer, it doesn't get deeper, it gets wider. We're the rim. After the water stood up and came in, the first hours were loud and confused and bright, with every porch light on, and people running and shouting and trying to save things that weren't made to be saved. There were men carrying widescreen TVs above their heads as if a picture on a dead screen would keep them dry when they reached the curb. There were women pushing shopping carts with packs of diapers and pet carriers wobbly on top. There were old folks holding a single photo in a Ziploc bag, the only thing they went back for. A guy I knew named Darnell tried to drive his pickup through a dip in the road because his mother was in a ground floor apartment, and the water climbed the engine and the truck floated sideways, and then it bumped the curb and perched there like a boat. He got out, and his boots made that wet, smacking sound, and he waded into water that smelled like the back end of a canal in August, and I watched him go until he turned the corner and the water was waist-high, and I never saw him come back. I wrote his name on a scrap of paper and taped it to the wall so I wouldn't forget him. A newsroom teaches you to write names even when you think you'll remember, because you won't. By midnight, the lights had gone, not in a flicker, but in a firm way, a way that told you someone threw a switch miles inland and said, "We can't keep feeding a dead loop. The quiet that followed was the kind that makes you hear your own breath, and people stopped shouting because they were listening to themselves. The casino air handlers went still. The boardwalk flags hung like wet towels. You could hear the little things then. The tinking of floating nails hitting brick. The soft scraping of a shutter loose on one hinge. A little glass clink as a bottle tapped another bottle in a current that was slow, steady, tireless. When sound goes like that, your head fills with every what if. What if the water doesn't go out on the next tide? What if the water has found a new normal? What if the line on the wall is the bottom of the world from now on? I slept for an hour or two that night, head on my arm, and woke because the diesel coughed. I have a hand crank radio on the desk, and I spun it up to see if the robot voice was still alive. It was. It said the back bays were above major flood at gauges named after towns you could picture in your mind. Mays Landing, Tuckerton, Summers Point. And then, it said a river up near Trenton was now out of its banks because the tide had pushed back on its mouth and the rainwater had nowhere to go. It said a hospital in a shore town had moved patients to the 4th floor and had run out of dry linens. It said emergency traffic would be heard on Channel 7 for anyone with a scanner. Then it read a list of shelters that were all inland, of roads that were underwater. I tried each frequency one by one until I caught a human voice, the kind with a little roughness around the edges. And she said they were closing Route 40, where it meets the causeway, because the current over the asphalt had picked up enough to move a sedan sideways. And she said, if you were listening and you were in a low place, go up, not out, up. In the days that followed the first lift, we learned how fast the rest falls apart. Phones turned from lifelines into dead weight. I have an old landline handset with the curly cord and a plug like a little mouth, and it worked for half a day, stuttering, and then that went too. The water found the manholes and pushed them up like coins flipping on a bar. It found basements and refrigerators and freezers full of food and turned them sour in hours, not days. The grocery store up on the higher ground that had stayed dry set rules with a Sharpie on cardboard. 1 gallon of water per head, 2 cans, no change, and they took cash because the machines made a beeping sound and displayed nothing. The gas station shut its pumps because the generator they had was not meant to run them, and they kept 1 hose for EMTs, and 1 for police, and 1 for anyone with a boat that could ferry people off roofs. I watched a woman in her 70s carry a 5-gallon bucket of water in each hand from a fire hydrant that had been cracked open at Tennessee and Atlantic, her arms shaking, her jaw clenched, and 2 young men came up to take 1 bucket, and she held on like they were trying to steal her child. They weren't. They were good boys, but everything inside us had shifted 2 inches to the dark. I don't want to paint only the worst of us. The worst is true. So is the best. On the second night, a man I've only ever known as the guy with the red Phillies cap came by with a roll of wire and said he used to install boat electronics, and he climbed the stairs with the wire looped over his shoulder and looked at my battery bank and said, "You're wasting what little you've got," and he rewired the whole mess so the charge controller wouldn't cook itself. He left a cooler with 4 ice packs that were melting like snowballs in July, and said, "Put your meds in there if you've got any that need cold." On the 3rd day, a woman from the Vietnamese bakery that always smelled like heaven when the exhaust vents worked brought a pot the size of a drum with rice and shrimp cooked in a single metal box over charcoal, and the line for it was a line that behaved itself. And she gave the biggest scoop to a kid sitting on a folding chair with a towel around his shoulders, who stared at nothing and said nothing because he had watched the street go away while his father went after a dog that slipped its leash, and neither one came back. I've been told by 3 different people who never met each other that the barrier islands up and down the coast are all going through this in their own way. There's a woman who came from Brigantine in a kayak who says the north end looks like a mosaic of glittering streaks when the sunlight hits it because the water has lifted all the fiberglass insulation out of crawl spaces and turned it into floating pink and yellow scum. A guard from down in Wildwood passed through 2 days ago and said the amusement rides look like the bones of a huge animal half buried in mud, and the warehouses behind the boardwalk smell like dead fish and bleach. A guy from Margate who used to rent out beach chairs told me he can stand on his porch and see the ocean and the bay at once now, a silver band in front and a silver band behind, and that on a still morning, they make the same soft chewing noise like the edge of a blanket pulled over someone's face. I don't know how much is true, and how much is the way a scared mind paints a picture. I know the water line on my own stairwell. It's there. It's honest. It's up to my hip. There's been talk of a cause you can anchor on, a lever you can pull, a person you can push to make it stop. I don't have such a lever. I do have a list of things that help and things that hurt, and I'll say them out loud so that you can decide which side you're on tonight. If you have a working car, and you think you can drive through water that looks like a sheen over asphalt, don't. What looks like 1 inch is 10, because the roadbed has caved under the top, and your weight will find the hole, and you will sink into water that moves like a slow hand, and no one will get there in time. If you have a generator, you already know its voice and its needs. But if you don't, learn them. Keep it dry. Keep the exhaust pointed where it cannot reach your lungs. People who make it through a flood die dumb deaths in dry rooms because they breathe the wrong thing. Share a charge when you can, but do it smart. A phone at 100% that has no tower won't save you. A radio at 40% will. For water you can trust, don't trust the faucet if your street is under a tide. The lines draw in as much as they push out when the pressure drops, and salt will ride up into the pipes. You can collect the clean rain when it comes off a roof if you let the first 10 minutes run, to flush the grit and the bird mess. A metal pot on charcoal or wood will make it safe if you let it roll. If you're in a crowd, keep the buckets clean. 1 bucket to gather, 1 bucket to store, 1 cup to dip. I've seen more illness in the last week from people sharing a dipper than from any cold water. For food, you already know the rule. Eat what will rot, and then what will rust. The freezer will lie to you. It will feel cold long after the power is gone. Trust your nose. Even if it means you throw away meat you paid for with 3 nights on the line, throw it away. People are getting thin. Don't trade tomorrow for 5 mouthfuls that will send you to the floor tonight. There are people listening in houses that are dry but isolated, and they're afraid that leaving will expose them to worse. Let me tell you how we've learned to move without getting in the water. We've found that the old delivery ramps between buildings make bridges with 2 sheets of plywood and 3 cinder blocks. We mark the good routes with orange ribbons from the party store that floated down a hallway, knotted at knee height so the ribbon still shows above water. A sleeve of contractor bags doubles as a raincoat if you cut holes just so. Duct tape will keep a pant cuff from soaking if you wrap it over the boot. We move as a chain, not as heroes. 1 person across, 1 person on the near side keeping eyes on, 1 person behind with the long hook to fish a pack if it slips. We go during the hour after low tide, when the water breathes in before it breathes out again, and even then we assume the unexpected. We've put ladders on 2nd-story windows and left them there. If you see a ladder dangling where no one stands, that's a public promise. Use it. Then leave it for the next person. The people who wear uniforms in normal times are here, but they're thin on the ground and tired and doing math you can see in their eyes. They pick which call gets the boat and which call gets a note on a clipboard. Don't waste them. If you can solve a thing with your neighbor, do it. If you can carry a body together instead of calling for one more gurney, do it. If you have a light that can sweep a street at dark tide, aim it at the corners where the water piles, not at the windows of people trying to sleep. If someone asks for a pair of dry socks and you have 3, you have 2. If someone asks for your last sock and you have 1, you have 1. I'm not preaching. I'm selfish in the same way you are. But I've watched one little act turn a row of locked doors into a row of doors that open without a question. In the first days, I saw a family nail their floor vents shut with strips of cedar pulled from a closet shelf, and when the man next door saw them do it, he stopped yelling at his wife and copied the trick. And then the guy below them did it too, and when the next tide pressed in, the room stayed dry, and 10 people slept instead of lying awake counting drips, and the whole building woke with better heads and did a full day's work. That's the math that saves us. There are rumors about the outside. Someone said the turnpike at exit 4 looked like a truck graveyard because the water had climbed the median from some creek nobody ever knew the name of, and the drivers parked nose to the sky and ran. Someone said the barrier swung down at the Garden State Parkway toll because a woman in a booth decided enough was enough and nobody needed to stop for a ticket in the rain anymore. And they drove through free and left the change buckets overflowing with wet quarters. I heard that the bay came over the road into Ocean City and met the ocean on the flattest blocks and then pulled back and left a brass bed frame standing alone in the middle of a street. I heard that the whales were seen off the steel pier in a pod, like a family at a reunion, and I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if it's hope or a trick of eyes that want to see something big and alive in all this slack water. I write it down anyway, because the mind needs room to breathe. As for me, I'm not a hero, and I won't pretend I am. On the first day, I tried to carry too much. I tried to save boxes of tapes that no one asked for. I tried to save a plant that was already dead. I tried to save a desk that memories had glued to me, and I slipped on the staircase and cut my palm on a nail, and sat there and watched the blood run in lines that looked like little red rivers and thought, "This is it, you idiot. You cut yourself, and you did it for a desk." I wrapped it in a towel. I poured peroxide on it from a first aid kit meant for paper cuts, and I cried like a child, and then I laughed because it was either laugh or hit the wall with my good hand until I had 2 bad ones. Since then, I've made my world smaller. I keep the generator dry. I keep the antenna pointed. I keep the list of names taped to the wall. I write the high water marks with a pencil and note the time. I boil water and I share it with the floor below. When the sun comes up, I go to the roof and I count the birds. Today, I counted 3. The day before that, I counted none. You can decide if that's a trend. I call it a mercy. I have a few notes from people who pass through and ask me to say things out loud on this frequency in case their voice didn't reach who it needed to reach. I won't say names you didn't hand me to share. I'll say the facts. A man from Pleasantville wanted his sister on Iowa Avenue to know he moved their mother to the church on the hill where the parking lot drains a little faster. A woman from Chelsea Heights wanted her uncle to know the dog is alive and wearing a collar made from a belt and a key ring, and if he hears barking when the tide turns, that's them, not trouble, and he shouldn't try to cross the canal until morning. A kid who is old enough to shave but not old enough to play it cool asked me to say, "Mom, I found the box with the photos, the one with the wedding picture that got wet during Sandy, and I put them in the oven with the pilot on, and I'm watching them dry. If you can't get back, I'll keep them safe. I hear the generator settle into a lower tone when the air cools after midnight. It tells me I have another hour before I need to check the fuel. I'll use that hour to say what I wish someone had said to me that first night in a voice I trusted. Listen to the water. It lies, but it lies the same way, and if you learn its language, you can see a day ahead. If it comes up fast, it will go out fast, and it will take things with it. Boards, tools, shoes, your patience. If it comes up slow, it will sit, and sitting water is worse than any rush because it gets inside everything. Don't fall in love with a plan. Fall in love with the people you can reach in 3 blocks and the ones you can reach by waving from a window, and build the day around that. Keep your pack light. Keep your cord dry. Keep your temper for the nails and the stubborn bolts and the gates that stick, not for each other. This isn't the end. It is an end for some things, and saying that plain does not mean I've given up. It means I understand what's in front of us. The map you've carried in your head since childhood has changed without asking you. It will change again before dawn. There will be new names for places you thought were fixed, and some names will be all that's left where a street used to be. We will write the new map as we walk it. We will draw it with chalk and tape and pencil and ash. We will learn where the floor is higher by 3 inches, and how many steps from the landing to the safe door, and which roof drains last, and which ones never drain at all. We will learn. We always do. People have lived on edges since the first huts went up by rivers that swelled and shrank as the moon passed. We forgot that the edge moves. The edge moved. Now we move with it. I'm going to stay on as long as the fuel holds and the batteries keep their little red eyes open. If the signal fades, it's the antenna twisting in the wind, not me leaving you. If it dies and comes back, it's me running downstairs for a can of diesel with a funnel made from a cut soda bottle. I'll give you the time by the wind-up watch I keep on the desk. It says 11:54 p.m. now. Low tide by my notes is a little after 1. We'll see how honest the bay wants to be. If you're alone, you're not. Not while this voice reaches you. If you're in a room with people, listen to them breathe, and count that as proof we still know how to be together without a screen telling us we are. We're going to make it through this night. I don't say that like a promise I can keep for you. I say it because I need to hear it said out loud. We're going to make it through this night by cherry-picking and stealing every trick that works, by taking turns on the heavy end of the board, by letting the person with the sure hands tie the knot, and the person with the loud voice talk to the scared kid, and the person with the steady legs carry the water up the stairs. The sun will come like it always comes, later than we want and sooner than we fear, and it will show us the mess again, and we will curse, and then we will get up and start the next list. My name is Rudy Giuliani. This is 107.3 FM. If you can hear me, you're part of the circle now. Keep your radio off between checks to save the battery. I'll say a few more things while the generator grumbles and the night presses at the boards. I know some of you have eyes on inland towns that look almost normal beyond the last wet block, and the pull to leave is strong. If you can go, and you have a clear route, and you can go without leaving someone behind who cannot follow, go in daylight and hug the high crown of the road. If you cannot go, don't waste yourself dreaming of the highway. Build the small world so tight and so smart that when a door opens, you are ready with your pack and your plan and your team, and you do not stumble. Keep a note folded in your pocket with the names of the people you're with, and any medicine they need, and the name of the street where someone could find you, what the street used to be called and what you call it now. We've started renaming the corners, Red Door, Broken Eagle, Blue Ladder, because the old signs sit under 3 feet of water and give no help. I'm going to top off the diesel in 5 minutes. When I come back, I'll talk about how we're building a line of light in the stairwell with solar yard stakes that still charge on the roof when the sun sneaks past the clouds, and how that silly green glow has stopped 2 falls on the stairs, and how if you have 4 lights and your neighbor has none, you can put 2 on their landing without asking and expect nothing back. I'll talk about the old man on Saint. James, who spent yesterday showing kids how to take a busted box fan apart and use the cage to make a basket that will hold a wet pot steady over charcoal, and how he smiled when the soup didn't tip and said, "Lower the heat, wait longer, you'll waste less wood." I'll talk about the little things that make us feel like we still live in a place with a name, not a disaster with a date. Hold on, keep your match dry. Keep your radio near your ear so you can turn it low and not wake the ones who finally fell asleep. I'll be right back with the next breath. It's 12:37 a.m. and you're still with me on 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and the only thing standing between this voice and silence is a single generator humming in the corner with half a can of diesel left. The tide has turned, though I don't know what that means anymore. The notes I've been keeping used to show a rhythm. Up 6 feet, down 6 feet, 12 hours apart. Dependable as a clock. Tonight, the numbers don't look like that. The last high didn't fall as far as the one before, and the low just now still left the street, with water lapping halfway up the tires of cars that have been abandoned so long, their alarms died. That means each cycle is climbing, like a staircase we don't want to climb but are being dragged up step by step. I went out an hour ago with a lantern just to see how the block looked. The reflection of the streetlights that used to run clean and sharp on the wet pavement is gone, because the bulbs are gone, and the poles lean like drunk men into the water. The only light was the thin beam from my own lamp and the ghostly glow of the moon, which kept breaking into shards on the moving surface. I saw a refrigerator float by, slow and sure, still with magnets stuck to its door, a baseball schedule, a pizza coupon, and a crayon drawing of a stick family in front of a sun. I followed it until it turned the corner with the current, and I thought about the person who drew that sun. Where are they now? Are they asleep on a stairwell with wet socks on their feet? Or did they make it inland? Or did they vanish into the same black water their fridge is riding? We used to think of this city as permanent, gaudy maybe, but permanent. Concrete piles, steel piers, casinos that never went dark. That's the lie we all shared. We built on sand and convinced ourselves the sand would stay still. The old people here, the ones who remember storms that knocked cottages sideways and shoved boats onto lawns, they're not surprised in the way we are. They always said the ocean doesn't ask permission. It just takes back what it wants when it wants. They didn't mean it as prophecy, but tonight it feels like one. The official voices are gone. No mayor on the TV, no governor on the radio, no FEMA message telling you where the next truck of bottled water will be. The silence is louder than any announcement. Either the lines are cut, or the people who were supposed to read the words into the mic have packed their own families into SUVs and pointed them west. A man I trust, a guy who's been patching boats since the 80s, said he heard from a cousin that the National Guard rolled through Vineland with lights flashing but no sirens. They weren't stopping, just moving, and the convoy looked heavy, like they weren't planning to circle back. If that's true, it means we've been written off. You don't move all that steel and diesel inland unless you've decided the coast is already gone. But here's the part they don't write into their plans. People stay. They stay because their mothers are buried here, because their mortgages are tied to houses that are already half ruined, because the only job they know is frying dough or dealing cards or fixing the Ferris wheel gears, because leaving feels like surrendering the last shred of dignity. They stay, and they improvise. I saw a guy tie empty bleach jugs to a plywood sheet and make a raft. I saw a kid dragging buckets of water up to the second floor and filtering it through a pillowcase filled with sand. I saw a family string a clothesline across a stairwell and hang wet blankets in the one patch of air that wasn't dripping, and when I asked what they were doing, the woman said, "If they're dry, it feels normal." And that's all I want. Just something that feels normal. This is what we are now. Half in the water, half out, stubborn, scared, and figuring it out one stupid, brilliant trick at a time. I'll keep talking until the generator dies, because maybe someone out there has their own trick to add, and maybe my voice carries far enough over this frequency to stitch us together, at least for the night. It's 1:41 a.m., and you're still tuned to 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm sitting in a room that smells like damp wood and diesel fumes, watching the tide press its knuckles against the front door again. The pencil marks I've been scratching on the wall to track the water don't line up in a neat rhythm anymore. They creep higher, even when the tide is supposed to be slack, and the low points don't fall back to where they used to. The floor is cold through my boots, not from the air, but from the water pushing under the concrete slab. You can feel it, like a pulse. I can hear things moving outside that I can't see. Not people, just the world rearranging itself. A dumpster nudging down the street one slow bump at a time. A car door clapping open and shut until the hinge gives up. Wood snapping as something floats into a wall and stays there. Every sound makes you jump, because every sound could be the moment the water chooses a new path. The city's guts are spilling. Basements are useless now, just black pits where the water collects. Gas lines bubble at the edges of intersections, little pops like soda fizz, only deadly. Power is gone, truly gone. Not the kind where you wait for a truck to flip a breaker, but the kind where the substation is 10 feet underwater and humming like a hive before it shorts out for good. I walked to the edge of one this afternoon, and the smell of ozone was so thick it made my teeth ache. Nobody's repairing that. Nobody's even writing a ticket about it anymore. The strangest part is the quiet from inland. A week ago, you could still hear the distant highway, trucks, motorcycles, the faint whoosh of traffic that never sleeps. Tonight, there's nothing. It's like the land itself drew back and left us here on a spit of sand with no rope. The only voices I catch are from people still stuck like me. A man 2 blocks south shouting at his dog to stay on the stairs. A woman singing to a baby in a cracked, tired tone that made me want to cry. Once in a while, a generator like mine will cough to life, run for a few minutes, then fall silent again. Each one is like a flare in the dark. You hear it, you know someone else is out there, and then it's gone. I keep thinking about the way the water first came, not with fury, but with patience. A lift, a press, and then another. People fear storms, because storms roar and break and leave you picking through rubble. This isn't a storm. This is something slower, heavier, harder to fight. It doesn't blow itself out. It doesn't give you a morning after where the sky clears and you start sweeping. It just keeps coming, steady and smug, like it knows time is on its side. If you're listening to me now, if you've got a little radio set on the sill or hanging by a nail, here's what I can tell you. Don't waste your strength trying to push back what you can't stop. Save it for climbing higher. Save it for keeping something dry that you'll need tomorrow. Find one thing to protect. A bag of rice, a box of matches, a pair of boots, and treat it like gold. That one thing might be the reason you get through the next night. I'll stay on as long as the generator lets me, even if my voice is just one more piece of flotsam drifting through the static. If the signal fades, know I'm still here, watching the water climb the stairs, writing names on scraps of paper, keeping the light alive in the dark. It's 2:58 a.m., and you're still with me on 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and the walls here feel thinner than they did yesterday. The generator hum is steady for now, but the floor beneath me has taken on this faint tremor, like the ground itself has loosened and is drifting with the tide. I keep checking the pencil marks I scratched on the plaster, and each one looks too close to the last. The staircase down to the lobby smells of wet plaster and gasoline, and when I shined my lantern a few minutes ago, I saw the water line halfway up the doorframe. The knob is slick with salt crust. It isn't a basement anymore. It's a cistern. I walked up to the roof earlier tonight. The air was warmer than it should be, almost heavy enough to choke on, and the moon hung pale over a city that no longer has edges. From above, the streets look like canals without names. Traffic lights blink uselessly in the water, each one glowing faint red or green until it sparks and dies, swallowed by the black. A mattress floated past, turning in circles. A broken headboard caught against it like driftwood. The Ferris wheel in the distance, steel bones of the pier, was half drowned, the bottom cars dipping in and out of the tide like they're testing the ride. It should be still, but it creaks. Everything creaks. You want to know what people are doing, the ones who haven't left or can't leave. I'll tell you. They're building rafts from doors, tearing out stair rails for poles, strapping coolers together with twine. They're drying socks over tin can fires. They're trading salt crackers for a flashlight that still works. They're climbing roofs not to wave for help anymore, but just to breathe easier, to feel like they're above it all for a minute. A man down on Columbia Avenue rigged a pulley to drag supplies to his second floor. I watched him pull up 2 buckets of canned food, one at a time, his arms shaking. He waved at me like it was a small victory, like he'd beaten the ocean with a rope and a hook. The hospitals are finished. I heard from someone who made it out of Shore Medical that they'd moved patients to the 4th floor, but the water didn't care about floors. The machines died first, then the lights, then the patients. They left, the staff and the sick together, climbing into laundry carts lined with plastic, pushed through halls that smelled like bleach and seawater. That hospital's dark now, just another building that hums with silence. I've been listening to the scanner, catching broken chatter. Someone inland said the rivers are choking, that the backflow from the bay is pushing them backwards, so the towns that thought they were safe are flooding from the inside out. A man's voice said Trenton's levee groaned like a cracked tooth, and then the signal cut. No one came back to finish the story. That's how everything feels now, unfinished. You hear half of something, and your head fills in the rest. If you're listening tonight, wherever you are, don't think of this as temporary. Don't wait for trucks that won't come. Don't trust the maps you grew up with. Think smaller. Think closer. One dry floor. One meal. One light. That's survival now. If you've still got neighbors, hold on to them, even the ones you never liked. Nobody gets through this alone. The clock on the wall says 2:58, but time's strange now. Hours feel stretched, like the tide itself is pulling them longer. I'll keep talking until the generator gives me silence. When it does, I'll wait, and I'll start again. As long as the voice reaches even one of you, you'll know you're not the only one awake in the dark. It's 4:12 a.m., and this is still 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm talking to you from a room that's shrinking, not because the walls are moving, but because the water presses closer every hour. I can smell it through the cracks in the boards. Salt, mold, and something sour that comes when things sit too long in the damp. The air is warm, sticky, and heavy. My shirt clings to me, and the back of my neck won't stop itching from dried sweat. The pencil marks I've kept on the wall are smudging where the damp creeps up from the floor. If I didn't write the times down next to each one, I'd think I was imagining it, but I'm not. The tide isn't breathing like it should. It's only inhaling, deeper each time. When I stood on the roof an hour ago, I couldn't tell where the bay ended and the ocean began. They've married now. It's one body, rolling in and out of the city with no care for boundaries. The streets below me are black mirrors, broken only by the drift of things that don't belong. Lawn chairs, a toppled soda machine, a child's tricycle spinning its front wheel slowly with the current. Every corner is a canal, every alley a vein that carries debris toward the open water. The pier is almost gone. Only the tallest steel ribs stand above the surface now, and they look like the skeleton of something ancient and proud that didn't know how to kneel. People are quiet tonight. Too quiet. On the first nights, there were shouts, arguments, desperate calls across flooded streets. Now it's just murmurs through thin walls and the scrape of buckets being hauled upstairs. They've stopped calling out for help that isn't coming. They're conserving breath, conserving hope, conserving anything they can keep in reserve. A man I saw yesterday on Arctic Avenue had built a raft from 5 doors nailed together. And when I asked him where he was going, he just shrugged. Up, he said. Wherever up is. That's the only plan left. Up. The official voices are gone. Whatever shelters were marked on the last lists I heard, they've either been swallowed or cut off. The radios inland talk about levees failing, about rivers running backward, about highways closing underwater that moves with a will of its own. You can tell in their voices that they're running out of ways to sound calm. And then the channel goes dead, and it doesn't come back. Every silence feels permanent now. I caught myself staring at a dead stoplight tonight. It was half underwater, the top bulb just visible, dark and dripping. I remembered how many times I cursed at those lights for being too long, too red, too stubborn when I was late for something that didn't matter. And now I'd give anything to sit in a car, waiting at that light, foot tapping the brake, knowing that the world outside was still solid, still mine. It's strange the things you miss when everything slips away. If you're still awake with me, if your radio still hisses and hums with this voice, here's what I can tell you. Don't waste yourself wishing it all back. That kind of longing will drown you faster than the tide. Save your strength for what's in front of you. Keep one thing dry. Keep one match, one page, one rope, one meal. Share when you can, not because it's noble, but because it keeps you human. And being human is the last line we have. The ocean can take the streets, the lights, the buildings, but it doesn't know what to do with people who hold on to each other. It's 4:12 by my watch, but the night feels endless. I'll keep talking as long as the generator hums. If it cuts, wait for me. I'll come back if I can. You're not alone. Not while this frequency carries my voice. It's 5:27 a.m., 107.3 FM, and my name is still Rudy Giuliani. The sky out my boarded window has turned that dull steel gray that means morning is close, but there's no relief in it. Sunrise doesn't push the water back. It just makes the wreckage clearer. The generator is still running, but it's got a shudder now, like it's tired, like it's reminding me that every minute it gives me is a borrowed one. The air tastes of rust, thick enough that when I lick my lips, it's like I've been chewing on a nail. I went to the roof again before sitting down to talk. From up there, the city is unrecognizable. Where the streets should be, there are long, flat rivers with no direction, only ripples where debris floats past. The boardwalk is gone in sections, torn out like teeth, and the pilings that remain look like stumps in a rotten mouth. I saw a swing set, bright red and yellow, bobbing in the current until it caught on a street sign. The paint still looks cheerful, even while the rest of it drowns. It's almost cruel how color can survive where everything else is breaking. The silence inland is heavier now. The last scraps of chatter I was catching on the scanner have stopped. No more coordinates for shelters. No more crackling orders about sandbags or road closures. Either the transmitters are drowned, or the people behind the mics are gone. All that's left is the occasional pop of static and the low hiss that reminds me the radio still breathes, even if the voices don't. If you've got a set at home, keep checking, but don't expect the cavalry. Nobody's coming down these flooded highways with trucks and bottled water. It's just us. I've seen people shifting their focus. On the first nights, they were still trying to rescue couches, televisions, things too heavy to matter. Now it's matches, knives, rope, cans. One man dragged a cooler through water up to his chest, and when he set it down on the curb, he opened it to show 2 loaves of bread wrapped in plastic. He smiled like he'd found gold. Maybe he had. Another woman, barefoot and soaked, carried a bundle of firewood above her head, her arms shaking, but she didn't drop it. People understand now. Wood is worth more than money, bread more than silver, fire more than anything. The hospitals, the shelters, the promises, they're finished. The only hope is the small things we keep alive. A candle that stays lit, a pair of socks that stays dry, a jar of rice that doesn't spill. That's the scale of survival now. If you've still got neighbors, even ones you barely know, lean on them. Share one pot instead of 2, one flame instead of none. The water divides us with every rising inch, but we don't have to let it. The clock says 5:27. Sunrise is close, but it doesn't feel like an end to the night. It feels like another reminder that days don't mean much when the ocean makes its own rules. I'll stay on the air as long as the diesel lasts. If the signal cuts, don't think of it as silence. Think of it as me refilling the can, wiping my hands, and coming back. Because if you can hear me, you're not alone. Not yet. Not ever. If we refuse to be. It's 6:49 a.m., and you're still tuned to 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and the sun has cracked the horizon, though it doesn't feel like a sunrise. It feels like a slow, pale reminder that the ocean doesn't care what time it is. The light spills across the waterlogged streets and shows everything in too much detail. What you can't see in the dark, the ruin, the wreckage, the floating scraps of lives, you can't escape in daylight. Every street that once carried buses and bikes and people headed to work now carries refrigerators, doors, and planks drifting past like ghosts. The ocean has claimed it, and the sun only makes the claim visible. From the roof, I can see farther now. The bay and the sea are one endless gray sheet, stretched tight and rippling with the wind. The landmarks that gave this place a shape are fading. The piers are crooked bones sticking up from the surface. The boardwalk is half gone, the rest sagging like rotten teeth. A Ferris wheel cart still hangs above the water, rocking gently as if it's waiting for riders who will never come. The only moving things are scraps, plastic chairs, half a dock, a street sign that says, "No parking any time," bobbing where no car will ever stand again. People are slower this morning, not from sleep. They didn't get any, but from the weight of knowing this isn't passing. On the first nights, the flood was a thing to fight, to wait out. Now it's just the new ground. I saw a woman leaning from a second-story window with a broom, pushing a board away from the opening like she was swatting a fly. I saw two kids fishing empty bottles out of the water with a rake, laughing like it was a game. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just easier to laugh than to admit they're pulling trash from their own drowned street. The hospitals are dark. I heard through a man with a handheld set that Shore shut its doors for good. The last patients were dragged out in laundry carts, blankets piled over them against the damp. He said the water crept up to the 4th floor, and then there was nothing left to move higher into. After that, silence. Nobody's patching wounds anymore. Nobody's writing charts. If you get hurt now, your treatment is whatever your neighbor can improvise with a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a steady hand. The inland stations are gone too. No more orders, no more lists of shelters. Just static. If you've got a radio, you've probably heard the same. It feels like we've been cut loose, like someone inland drew a line and said, "Everything beyond here is the oceans." And maybe they're right. Maybe they're looking at maps covered in water and realizing there's no line left to hold. So what's left? The little things. Matches that stay dry. A loaf of bread wrapped tight in plastic. A pocket knife sharp enough to cut rope. A pair of boots that keep your feet warm. A neighbor you can lean on when your hands shake too much to tie a knot. That's the scale of survival now. Forget the trucks, forget the headlines, forget the promises. It's us. Here. Holding on inch by inch. The clock says 6:49. The morning is here, but it doesn't feel like morning. It feels like another hour to endure. I'll keep the generator running as long as I can. I'll keep this voice alive as long as the frequency carries it. And if you can hear me, remember, you're not alone, not while this signal still cuts through the hiss. It's 8:02 a.m., and this is still 107.3 FM. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and the morning air feels heavier than the night ever did. The sky's a pale sheet, no blue, just a dull brightness that presses down on the city like a wet blanket. From my window, I can see the water gleaming flat and wide, broken only by pieces of houses drifting past like forgotten toys. A garage door slid by half an hour ago, riding the tide like a raft. A sofa followed it, sagging, the cushions soaked and split open, so the stuffing trailed behind in long white ribbons. Every piece of wreckage carries a memory, but nobody's left to claim them. The streets are silent, except for the water slapping against the walls. People don't shout anymore. They move in silence, shoulders bent, eyes hollow. I saw a man wading through waist-deep water, carrying a bag of rice on his head like it was gold. He didn't look at me, didn't look at anything but the second floor of the building ahead. He knew one stumble would cost him everything, and he didn't have anything else to spare. A woman leaned from a third-floor window and lowered a bucket on a rope. He dropped the rice in, tied the rope, and walked on without a word. That's what survival looks like now. Trades done in silence, favors without thanks, movements stripped of everything but need. I've stopped hearing the faint hum of the inland highways. No trucks, no motorcycles, no cars pushing through. The bridges are useless, the roads drowned. Whatever help was out there has retreated, leaving us to the water. The scanner is nothing but bursts of static now. No voices, no instructions. It's strange how final silence feels when you've been clinging to scraps of chatter. When the line goes dead, you realize how small your circle has become. Just you, your neighbors, the few blocks that remain above the tide, and the sound of the ocean filling in every empty space. I keep writing names on scraps of paper and taping them to the wall. People I've seen, people I've heard about, people who vanished in the water. Darnell with the pickup, Alice from hotel security, the bartender who found fish in her ice chest. I don't know why I do it. Maybe so I don't forget. Maybe so when the water takes this room too, there'll be a record someone might find one day. Proof that we were here, that we had names. If you're listening now, here's what I can tell you. Don't waste yourself trying to drag the world back. That world is gone. Save your strength for what's in front of you. Keep your matches dry. Keep your boots tight. Keep your food sealed. Help when you can, not because it's noble, but because it keeps you human. That's the line we have to hold. The line between being swallowed by water and being swallowed by despair. The clock says 8:02, but time feels broken. Every hour is just another measure of how much the tide has stolen. I'll stay on as long as the generator hums. If it cuts, wait for me. I'll be back if I can. You're not alone. Not as long as this frequency carries my voice. It's 9:36 a.m., 107.3 FM, and this is Rudy Giuliani still speaking into the static. The daylight's up in full now, though it doesn't bring warmth or comfort, just a clearer look at the damage. The water has settled into a gray sheet that reflects the sky like a mirror, but the surface is littered with the guts of the city. A rowboat floats past without oars, carrying nothing but a pile of warped 2x4s. A vending machine is tipped sideways against a lamppost, its glass cracked, the sodas bobbing inside like they're waiting for someone to come along and drop a quarter. But there's no one out there to buy a drink anymore. From the roof, I watched what used to be Atlantic Avenue. You wouldn't know it now. The water lies smooth and wide, and the tops of traffic lights poke out like periscopes. At one corner, the red light blinked twice before it fizzled out and died, leaving only the ocean's own rhythm to rule the crossing. I saw a sedan parked at the curb, the windows underwater, the antenna barely visible. For a second, I swore I saw a fish dart inside, quick and silver, like the car was just another reef. It hit me then. This isn't our city anymore. It's theirs now, the creatures that swim and drift, the ocean itself. We're just squatters on what used to be ours. The people who stayed are quieter this morning. They don't waste words. I passed a man on Kentucky Avenue with 2 jugs of water balanced on his shoulders. He nodded once and kept moving. A woman with wet hair leaned out a second-floor window and poured a bucket into the street, not to get rid of it, but to make space for the next bucket she had to catch. Nobody's asking questions anymore. Nobody's waiting for news trucks or helicopters. The only broadcast left is this one, and I don't know how far my voice even reaches through the hiss. I keep thinking about the first days, when people shouted names into the night, when there was still the sound of sirens, the sound of running engines, the sound of neighbors banging on doors. That noise has faded into a hum of survival, Pots clanging, ropes creaking, buckets scraping against walls. The city is quieter than it has ever been, and that silence is its own kind of weight. If you're listening, if your radio is still crackling with this signal, hold on to whatever piece of ground you have. Don't waste yourself fighting for things that won't float. Protect the food, the water, the dry floor. Keep one thing sacred, a match, a light, a page in a notebook, because that small thing might carry you through the next tide. The government isn't coming. The shelters are drowned. The plans are gone. It's just us now, holding on to each other one block at a time. The clock on my desk says 9:36. The tide's due to turn again soon, though I don't trust it anymore. Each time it rises, it stays higher. I'll keep speaking as long as the generator hums, as long as my hands can grip this microphone. If you can hear me, then you're not the only one awake in the wreck. That's worth something. Maybe the only thing.